Good morning, good afternoon.
Hello,
Uh,
hello.
Welcome to our second guest feature of the As You Should podcast. Today we are joined by a lovely Maya Brasington. We're here today to talk about Maya's recent project, Magic Isle. If you just bear with me 1 second. So Magic Isle is an ongoing exploration of self-identity, focusing on the way that descendants of immigrants often construct magical and mystical imaginations of their distant homeland. The work derives from its title from a short travel advert entitled Magic Isle, produced by the Barbados Board of Tourism in the late 1960s. Whilst drawing aesthetic inspiration from the important era of arrival, the work simultaneously examines the complex relationship between colonial Britain and the Windrush generation. By blurring the boundaries between myth, reality, this body of work illustrates the profound influence of images shaping identity and the potential to alter or rewrite memories. Through collaboration with her maternal family, Brasington embarks on the task of reconstructing and imagining family narratives. This involves reinterpreting archival imagery in response to familial myths and her own imaginative perspective. Magic Isle takes the form of an imagined photo album, blending found imagery, family photographs, and new photography, bridging the past and present as a homage to the artist's Bayesian heritage. Hey, there's a lot to unpack there.
It
Um,
always is with me.
but it's all good stuff though. Okay, so the first thing I actually wanted to ask you was how's your summer? So the last time I saw you, you've just graduated and just had your
Yeah,
exhibition. How has that transition been from
it's
everything to
interesting
yeah.
to, to say the least. I think it just naturally happens though when you move. So I left where I was living in Cornwall for
Mm,
university. I moved back home
mm.
and then I moved again, and now I'm in Portsmouth, which
Oh wow.
is an exciting new adventure.
Yeah, yeah. What
But yeah, no, it's been a cool kind of getting myself situated, trying to figure out what's going on. I
mm,
had a little show in Hastings at the beginning of August,
yep.
which was really cool, run by Picnic Studio.
Mm-hmm.
They're like a little photography group based in Hastings, and I had Magic Isle pasted onto the walls of like the promenade seating,
Oh, wicked. That's
which was
cool.
really cool. So you
Yeah,
could
yeah,
like
yeah.
look at the images and then sit down and like look at the sea, which is very cool. So that's a fun little thing of recent. But yeah.
Oh, wicked. That must have been a really interesting way to kind of like, I don't know, further experience the work and kind of bridge it back out to, I don't know, these themes of two different countries, two different homes, and
Yeah.
things like that. Okay, coming back into the work. So I first wanted to ask you. I remember when we last spoke. You said your mum, when you asked your mum about Barbados, she kind of gave like a really vague description, and it was kind of tricky for you to understand. So I wondered if you could kind of speak on your family's relationship to Barbados and things like that for a second.
Yeah, so my granddad came to England from Barbados in the late 1950s, so just after Windrush, but like still very much that generation.
Yeah.
Um, I basically had my mum, my aunt, and their relationship between my grandparents like very much kind of disintegrated, meaning that I think my mum and my aunt's relationship with Barbados as an idea and as a country kind of changed a lot because my white grandmother was the one who raised them. Um,
Right.
and I think kind of me talking to my mum about it, obviously I look at her and I see the Caribbean part of her, whereas she doesn't have as much connection to that. So like obviously she's visited it quite a few times, but it's all kind of from that like secondhand holiday kind of nature. So
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing to when you're searching for that thing, which is like you want to feel connected to that part of your heritage. It's quite a difficult thing. So when I asked her for the project, I was like, look, I want to do a project about Barbados and that kind of side of the family because it's not really talked about very often.
Mm.
it was met with like, well, why?
Mm.
What do you want to, like, what can I tell you? As in, there wasn't as much experience as I maybe had thought or hoped.
Right.
So she was like, oh, I don't really know, like, you know, you can kind of look it up or go somewhere else. And it was like giving me these secondhand avenues of information to look up from
Yeah,
like
yeah.
my own granddad's like country.
Right.
So that took me to that YouTube video, which my mum actually sent to me, which thanks, mum, because you gave me the whole project.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I suppose, like, you know, when you don't really have like any genuine frame of reference, any like personal accounts, like where else would you turn to except an old travel video? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, and it's eerie because so it kind of all came about really like organically. Like I was getting as many pictures as I could from my aunt and my grandma and my mum of like trying to find bits of Barbados, and then paired with this video that was from the same time that they'd actually gone there and visited when my mum was
right,
young. It was like seeing a real version of it,
yeah,
like away from the family pictures, and it was kind of
okay,
like all of this written stuff was kind of helping me like create this imaginary version of it as well.
mm. On the written stuff, there's something I was going to pull out later, but in the book, there's a written piece that
Mhm.
begins, "You came to me in a dream." That written text piece, it kind of like brings the series kind of back towards you, I would have thought, and perhaps like your kind of like tertiary experience of what this place is like. And in it talks a lot about like feeling anger about not knowing what this place is really like. And I wondered if you had any like, I don't know, really driven anger about all of these things, and like what those kinds of emotions were like for you.
Yeah, I think throughout the whole project, it was emotional roller coaster. It was
Mm,
like reaching out, frustration, and I think it was frustration in like not having the access to like my mum maybe not feeling like she could share it, or I don't know, and then also like literally not having access to the country, to my relatives, because pretty much all of the ones that I knew from Barbados had died. So kind of that poem specifically is like I was at this peak of frustration with the project. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I've just got these thoughts and these like whispers, and then I did actually have a dream,
oh wow. so
which
you
is really,
so you wrote that yourself, the poem?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, that's
So,
cool.
yeah, thank you. No, I had a dream
Yeah,
where my great uncle turned up.
okay.
Which is Edwin, who is one of the figures in the picture that's on that same page.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'd never met him before. I've just seen him in pictures. But basically, I had this dream, and he was talking to me, and it was kind of like allowing my frustration, being like, "It's okay, like everything, like your anger is like valid,
Yeah,
and your frustration is valid," and like it was weird. It was like having this connection with like past figures and family members, like through photography. It was a really
that is
strange.
cool. That is really, really cool.
But yeah.
um the next thing I wanted to ask, more on kind of like photographic practice and things, uh even though it isn't the core focus, text is still quite prominent in throughout the project, like with the title typeface being from the video,
Yeah.
um, and then the poem as well. Um, I just wondered, like, generally, like, what. Um, oh damn it! I do this all the time. Lose my train of thought. 'Cause a lot of people in like in photographic practice kind of see text as image, and its own kind of its own visual medium. So I just wondered how you saw text, how that kind of comes into your practice at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess specifically for the cover thing, like I knew that I wanted it to have something to do with magic, because before I'd even found this video, I had always said that like Barbados to me is like an imaginary place, like
Mm,
it's a magical like construction in my head.
mm,
So I found the video, it was like that like eureka moment of like, wow, this thing is called that thing in my head. And the text, it was perfect. I knew I wanted the book to be blue because there's a chest, like the story of this family chest of photos, which was blue. And then it was like the flag of Barbados is blue and yellow. So that came in. Then the text being that kind of gilded and kind of storybook font, it was like perfect because I wanted to create this kind of like, it is a story, like a fantasy element to it. And also the 70s, 60s and 70s, like, I don't know, something about the way the text is with the colors paired, it creates that era, that vibe, which is when my mom was growing up and when she spent most of her time in Barbados. So it's like creating these echoes. And that's what all of the text does throughout the book, I think, is like it's playing with time a lot. So like the first poem that comes up is from the video and I like transcribed it. And that's kind of like setting the backdrop of like colonial viewpoints of the Caribbean. And then I guess you get my text kind of halfway through being like, wait, this is my perspective of this thing, kind of like the two. So yeah, text is very important and something I want to get into more.
Is writing poems and something that you've practiced since then, and like about wider context beyond this?
Kind of, yeah. I've always written poems alongside my photography. I find they're really helpful for understanding what I'm actually trying to say, because a lot of the time when I'm like taking images, I normally go and I'm like, well, I'm just going to go and make work on this idea. So I'll go home for like a couple of weeks or something and I'll just take a camera, I won't have any thoughts, and I'll just shoot random stuff. And then kind of like the poem is what allows me to like summate those feelings about what it is. So normally it happens at the end of a project, but this time it happened at the middle. But normally I find at the end of a project it's really good for me. It's almost like writing an artist statement, I think. Like I find it so much easier to write the poem in like the rawest form of how I'm feeling about that work. But yeah, no, it's definitely something. And I wrote like consistently when I was making this, like that poem that was in the book is like the main one, but I wrote like little bits and bobs. So it's always, I feel like it's way better to help me kind of analyze my own thinking. But
yeah, it's definitely it's, I guess towards the end of a project it's always easier, like bringing all of your random pieces together, and perhaps like towards the middle or towards the beginning, like you kind of just put things out and maybe something stick and maybe they don't, but yeah, it's all part of the process, really. So I wanted to talk a bit about the travel video as well, with it being such an important part of it. But as I was watching, I was just like, this. So it was it was made by, what do we say, the travel
board of tourism.
Travel board of tourism. And was Barbados still under British occupation at that time?
I think so. It's very like kind of that time is very like what's going on. Can't really remember. It's also the thing is at that time, it's here the Race Relations Act hadn't quite come in as well. So my mum was born before the Race Relations, and I think that act came in 65. My mum was born in 63. There's all those kind of like tensions, I guess.
Well, that even that comes into play, because as I'm watching this video, I'm thinking like, who has made this and who is it really for? Because you know, there's points where it's entirely like, you know, well, it is what it says on the tin, like a holiday advert, as it is, like, come see all these brand spanking new wonders that have just been here the whole time. And you know, it definitely feels like it's, in moments it's very for the British people, but then other points it's like, I don't know, like kind of, as you said, like bringing all those like 70s like design tropes back in, and all these visual ideas of what we believe stereotypical romance to be, like, you know, long walks on the beach and hand holding and sunsets um and all of this. So yeah, I just wondered what I mean, you might have already covered it, but like that first experience of seeing a video like that and thinking, oh, this is this what my heritage is? Like is this a genuine, authentic representation of it? Like what was going through your head as it came up?
Yeah, it was weird. I've watched it so many times now, but that first time watching it, it was kind of like the thing that really gets me is the poem at the beginning
Mm.
and how it's like, oh, through all 300 years of slavery and tears, and it's like it gives that little like throw out to it, and then just kind of like anyway. And it's
Remember
like,
this really horrible thing we did? Well, don't worry about that. Come do
yeah,
water sports.
yeah, and I'm like, well, why would you even put that in the beginning of like? And the thing is, I looked up that poem and I can't find any like record of it anywhere.
Yeah.
As of yet, I'm still searching. That was already like the jarring thing. And then you do kind of go through it and it's weird because you're thinking like, well, is this what like my granddad's life was like before he came here? Is that
Yeah.
like are the people in that video, is that what's real? And then it's like obviously you know that there's all that advertising, but when that's so swept up in like just how in the UK the Caribbean is treated,
Mm.
it's like, well, what's real and what's not? And I think that in itself comes into it, like the way you're showing it, it's like it's not a documentary, it is like pure like propaganda of your version of it. It's
Oh
scary.
yes, it's completely put together. I mean, you know, there's one point where right towards the end they talk about like, oh, they're literally like, oh, and Barbados is beautiful, beautiful local people, and then they show literally an entire group of white people from Britain or America or whatever, and you're like, well, what are you saying about what this place is really like then? Because it's not what, you know, someone from East Ham is going to find. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know why I said East Ham. There's no relevance to anything, but
No, it's so odd, and it's funny as well because my family is from a place called Worthing,
okay,
um, which is like near Brighton,
mm,
place in Barbados called Worthing,
right.
and they sit in the video, which is even funnier to me.
Oh wow. So all
So
these universal things just kind of coming back to you.
yes, it's like these synergies of like all that place. And I've actually visited, so the one time I went to Barbados, and I'm
Mm.
actually going in a couple of weeks or next week.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, it was very exciting. And I'm going to Worthing.
Wow.
So
You could
it's funny, like all those parallels.
you can make your own travel video out there and make it like
Yeah.
authentic or something. That's another
Like,
thing I was going to ask actually. Was
yeah,
moving image ever an interest for you at any stage of making this?
definitely. It always is one of those things that I don't think I've never given enough time to.
Mm.
But I always, when I take pictures, especially I do a lot of like going on walks with my family or like get like I'm very like quiet, reflective person. So I love to just take videos like still images,
Mm.
and have like all these like kind of shifting little moments. It's definitely something that I think it's like it's always in the back of my mind, like projection as well is something I really want to work on. And
Sure.
especially this project, I feel like expanding it could be a really cool thing with moving still images and video like together, kind of
Mm.
that time
Mm.
thing. But yeah.
Wicked. Yeah, we'll see. You know, see what comes up in Barbados. Don't fret on
Mm.
it too much, but yeah, I'd be really interested to see what you come up with, considering how much of the body of work has been like archival stuff, kind of like pairing those. Maybe you could even extend it further
Mhm.
and see where things go. I don't know. So you mentioned that some of the archival pieces did come from like your mum, your aunt, um,
Mhm.
and other family members. What? Sorry, what was that? Oh my god! Sorry, I'm bad at this. I'm trying. um, piecing the old and the new images together. what was going through your head? What decisions did you have to like grapple with? Was there anything um that you thought I have to keep this, I can't keep this, etc.
Mm.
Things like that. Would you be able to speak on that for a minute?
I think it's hard dealing with archival images in general, especially within this context, because I'm dealing with people that I've not necessarily met, or I don't like, I'm being told their stories through secondhand information. So there was a lot of like, I need to be respectful to who I'm showing in this book
Mm.
and why I'm showing them. And so like a lot of the particular characters are very like specific. So my great grandmother comes into it, and it's kind of like, yeah, thinking about how reframing people, I guess. And that
Mm.
comes with the pairings as well, and how I actually show the images, like how degraded they are,
Mhm.
or how like some of them I've like completely like spot cleaned them and stuff. It's like it's all a very different thing. And I think it changed a lot with actually just building the series of the book in itself. Like in building that, it really helped me like, okay, how are the motifs coming through? So like my own pictures of like shells and sea are all these like kind of more stereotypical images
Mm.
from my perspective. And then you have like images of the house or images of family members, but you can't really see who they are.
Yeah.
I think all of that is trying to show, it's all about kind of like amounts of knowledge that I have, I think.
Okay.
So it's like there are some people that are in like full view and some people that aren't.
Mm.
And like the backs of images as well, like turning them over,
Yeah.
cropping things. And I think a lot of it, like not many of the archive images are like just exactly as they were when I found them, which I quite like.
Mm.
They're all kind of like slightly altered to my version of how I see them,
Right.
or they come perfectly. So like there's an image which is pink. It's got like three little girls and there's all these rips around it. And it just happened that whoever gave me the picture, they'd obviously like stuck it up ages ago, and these rips had come from when they'd like taken the tape off. And that was one that I was like, no, I have to keep that like it is, because these rips are like the age.
Right.
And it's also funny because the girl in that image is a very distant relative. And it's like, I only know one of them. The other two, I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but you're probably related to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think there is an element of that. It's like hiding and revealing stuff is
Mm.
really important when working with the archive. But yeah.
Wicked. Yeah, I think especially as you said, like dealing with people who you literally don't know, but who, you know, you're told that you're bound by blood
Mm.
and love and home and all of these things. And I think as well, like having a bit more exposure to the Caribbean myself earlier this year, like I know that their idea on what photography is and representation, and you know, this idea that like a camera is like literally like taking your soul and all of
Mm.
these, like, you know, things that we've kind of come accustomed to, like, yeah, that's just an image, that's just an iPhone, that's a Canon,
Yeah.
Mamiya, whatever. But yeah, these are all like heavy things to consider. So it's really interesting to hear how much of a how prominent that was, basically.
Yeah.
um So, lastly, just got last few questions. So at your grad show at the Truman Brewery, there was an inclusion of a record player,
Yeah.
and I remember it wasn't in use. So I just wondered how that all came into play, the kind of installation of it all.
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to have an element of sound in
Mm.
some way, because when you're talking about Caribbean, and specifically like my great nan, she was like the original one that came to England. Just in general, like oral history is so important to Caribbean families. And I think I've found that as well throughout the project. Like everything is like my nan trying to remember someone's name, but that isn't their real name, but it's what everyone called them, or
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and did we go here or did we go there? Like, and I can't remember whose house this was or whatever.
Mm.
Like, all of that was really important, and like stories in that sense. So I really wanted something that you could hear, whatever that would be. And then talking to my mum, I originally had this idea that I wanted to have like a full-on setup of like a front room. Because I love, like, I don't know if you've seen the Michael Macmillan front room thing from like of Home.
Okay.
So it's like they had it at Tate Britain, but it's literally like a carbon copy of like a West Indian front room from the 70s.
Right.
And it's so cool.
Yeah. I'll look
Like
into that.
go in it and you can explore it and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
went to the exhibition and I was showing my mum pictures of it, and she was like, this is what their thing was like, this is what their living room was like. And I was like, of course it was. We were talking about these radiograms and record players and how like integral they are to that experience of the front room. Like you would invite everyone in and it would be like a party, and you'd have this music as being like this key thing, that because it's like they couldn't always go to places, so they would create these spaces in their own houses with these big record players. That's why they're huge stereos. So I really wanted one. I ended up Facebook Marketplace like for weeks and weeks and weeks. I ended up finding one that I could manage to get my hands on. And it's basically, it was like having this element of the home kind of with the project, and like adding that more, I don't know, I wanted like physicality as well as this sound. It's like, well, if you have sound, where's it coming from? And why? So I think those two things played together. And I ended up having, so the record player is completely still and doesn't move, doesn't play anything, but then I have a sound system kind of behind it with headphones that then plays this track of the sea. And it plays little snippets from the video and little bits of the sea that I've recorded, kind of overlaying and like kind of mashing over the video's poem.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, it's still, because it's like this old antiquated thing, but you kind of associate it, or at least I associate it completely with what I'm talking about. And then I have this kind of sea sound which comes out from like behind it in a way, which is, I guess, my version of what would come out of it.
Yeah. So it is like really just bringing, you know, all the themes that we've talked about kind of back around, and itself kind of like a record, if you will. That's cool.
It was cool because I was talking to my nan about it, and she had ended up somehow getting all of my, or not all, maybe most of my great nan's records. And so I ended up, there's a couple that I had in the installation, just like the covers of the vinyls, but my nan had like, I don't know, like 80 vinyls of this old Caribbean woman. And there was like church recordings and stuff, like
wicked.
Really cool. So I was just like, I just wanted to have that nod in a way to her, and that little bit of like family history, I guess.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Next I wanted to ask, like, having gone through all of this over the past several months and things, how do you feel now as a young mixed race woman? Has anything about your perspective on yourself has changed, or for better or for worse? Like what does that look like for you right now? Not for worse, but you know what I mean.
No, I know. I think being mixed race always has its like challenges, specifically if you don't have access to one of those parts of heritage. So I think the project in itself was a really cathartic way of me just even exploring that idea. It's not really something that we speak about that often in my family, and like through me developing this work over like the last 2 years, it's made so many conversations with my sister, who's obviously the same as me, and then with my mum and my aunt, and kind of like gathering everyone's perspective about how we feel in the family about it, and then how that kind of is shaping my own version of myself now. And I think it's still something that I will have grappling things with. I think it always is, because I was thinking earlier, actually, it's like you're always like in the middle of nowhere in a way.
Yeah. This weird state of limbo, just like you see that clip of Jackie Chan like screaming on the top of a hill, like, who am I? Like that's That's me every day.
I think that is very much just like mixed race people.
Pretty much. You may as well like spin a dial and like wait for it to like land on one particular type. Like, who am I today? Oh, I'm this guy. Sure.
Exactly. And I think what I've realized is that my perception of myself, I need it like it's really much like it's so much about your work on how you see yourself and
Yeah.
not letting other people's perceptions, because depending on who you're with, they'll tell you a different thing about what you are or who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's like, I don't know, if I'm with loads of white people, they'll be like, you're exotic. And then but with black people, they'll be like, you're white.
Yeah,
So
man. Oh, tell me about it. Jeez.
there's like a weird thing, and it's like it's okay. Like it doesn't matter
Mm.
what other people's opinions are. It's just like being all right in that you are in the middle of nowhere, that's fine. You can be a bit of whatever.
Yeah.
So
Do you
and
mind me asking, did you find school quite difficult then for things like that? Was that a difficult space for you to maneuver through or
not necessarily. I mean, there was always like these little things at school, but I grew up in the middle of nowhere, surprisingly.
okay.
So I grew up in the countryside,
Mm.
and I was probably one of maybe like 4 or 5. I don't even think there was a black child in the
Right.
school.
Right.
There was mixed race kids, there was Asian kids, but there was no black kids, I don't think.
Mm.
It was, I don't know, I think it was one of those like my mom kind of just treated it as like, if we don't really talk about it, you don't have a preconceived thing about it. So until I went to school, I had no idea what was going on
Right. Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
race and stuff. And I think it's only really until I've gotten older and understood, I think when I was in my teen years and kind of understood what it meant when people were saying stuff, or
Mm.
well, like those weird like looks, or
Yeah.
you don't know, people assuming that you're related to someone, or
Hmm. Yeah.
stuff
Oh,
like
aren't you brothers with my man? It's like, no, he's from Africa.
literally,
I'm-
literally me and a Bangladeshi boy. So I don't know, I've always been so like ambivalent to it that I think whatever was happening, it never affected me that much until like now, and I've got all this
Yeah.
information to like reanalyze the past.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh dear.
But
No, I fully get that, man. Well, I think maybe it was like two, maybe 3 years ago now. I had like probably the biggest identity crisis of my life. Like, I was writing like we had to do like whatever essays for uni, and I wanted to write about like the title I'd given myself was Blackness on Photography, and I hadn't tackled that at all before. So I wasn't really prepared for the behemoth of a conversation that that really is. And I was on the phone to my mum, like, "Mum, I'm not black," and she was like, "But you are." I was like, "No, mum, you don't get it." Anyway,
uh,
uh, yeah, it's all good stuff. The last thing I wanted to ask you was, I know we've only got a few minutes left on this, but throughout, well, coming to the end of Magic Isle, has making the work kind of changed any ideas that you've had about your own photographic practice and how you might want to make visual work moving forward?
yeah, I think this was one of the first times that I really allowed the archive to come into it, and kind of image manipulation to really come into it a lot.
Mm.
And I think that has really helped in terms of, I needed that element of texture and experimentation to kind of communicate the ideas. So I think that's something that I will adopt in the future.
Mm.
But I think as well, in the way that I shoot in general, is being slower, but also just more introspective, like not
Mm.
really going, I used to be like, right, I need a picture of me looking like this, and then I need a picture of this and this. And I've just kind of been like, why? Like, shoot how you feel, and like when you're in the right space, do it, and then those will be the best images to come out of it.
Yeah.
So kind of allowing it to be more personal. I think as well, allowing yourself not to show everything.
Yep.
Like there are so many images that I have from this work that aren't like available and
Yeah.
aren't in the thing. And I think it was like, yeah, allowing that like sense of privacy and keeping stuff to yourself. Like you don't have to share. And also like this is a really personal project, so like I've already done that. I don't need to add even more and more and more if I don't want to. And I think that's been a big thing of like, you can choose what you share.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, 100%. I mean, learning that there's, there's a classic saying like less is more or whatever. Like the amount of times that I've seen bodies of work that like just about touch on whatever subject, and then it goes to something else, and then you're just left wondering like, oh, where are these extra steps? Where what other talking points might there be? And I think for all the reasons that we've touched on today, that is a perfect kind of testament to that. Okay, wicked. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Maya. I'm sure everyone will enjoy this conversation as much as I have. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what you get up to next.
Yeah, thank you for having me.